Hello, Dr. Erica Smith. My name is Oscar Handel, and today I will be presenting my Module 2 PowerPoint pop culture presentation on the topic Silent Movies 1900s by me. My introduction is A Trip to the Moon 1902. In this film, there was at least one concept of influences, many concepts of influences that are human behavior, and all of them were into human behavior, by the way, which I would like to point out that it was social relations, since they were a group of people building a rocket to made out of the shape of a bullet to shoot themselves into the moon. And this shows how hard they were to work their hours and days and weekends to building the shape like bullet rocket and letting someone shoot them inside a giant cannon in the shape of a skinny telescope, which is showing them being voluntarily towards this immense goal in going to the moon. Now, the involuntary scene is when they reject being captured by crab-like human-shaped monster creatures that obey a slave king on the moon. And that's when the old white man destroys the crab slave king of the moon to escape from the moon with his crew, which I might add, and they head towards back to planet Earth and celebrate their dangerous journey from an involuntary event of being slaves, but they are voluntary of returning home away from the enslaved moon of crab-like human-shaped people. In slide 2, we're going to talk about James Wong Howe. Now, this source, I've only gotten one source from the pop culture universes that you pointed out in the instructions of this module project. James Wong arrived in the United States with his family in the 1900s to make better films, but he wanted to do it in a bona fide way of a camera person, and sooner or later he did with his angle camera skills that made him popular in 1923 in his still photography skills, which made him a really big hit with an actress, Mary Miles Minter, and she particularly really loved his skills and gave him a role to work on the next film of Drums of Fate of 1923. Now, Howie really had to face discrimination in his career because it was mostly related to the racism during the times of World War II. And he would always wear a button that says, "I am Chinese," to avoid the anti-Japanese sentiments towards his descent as an Asian. And he was added to the gray list of being spied on the watch list of government officials towards his actions in film career that went downfall in the 1950s. I apologize for the outside noise, Professor. Although in 1933, Howie was the first minority cinematographer admitted to American Society of Cinematographers, and that made him the first Asian in descent cinematographer to be nominated for an Academy Award here in the United States of America. But he was also nominated for Best Costume Designer for The Gates of Hell in 1955. In slide 3, how a sociologist would explain the birth and rise of popularity from my chosen culture, but also examining the political environment of the current events of societal structure of their time, or this time. I would say, as a sociologist in training, or as any sociologist I would know would say, they that these silent films were created before sound was ever even a thing in today's present society. And many audience members enjoyed these silent films since the acting performances were top tier and cheap to watch since they weren't expensive like right now. Silent films offered a more slower take on delivering perfect stories to tell dark or funny tones in their plots and reactions to what or how social life was during the 1900s. There was a particular difficulty in creating these features in films since the extension of the MPPC community and its independence was more expensive to gearing towards cheap one-reel shorts, though it was more elaborate to values of production and had higher costs in making these films happen. And it wasn't good for distributors since they were asking twice the price of a package load cost. But in conclusion, many studios have tried to manage these exigencies of filmmaking by selling these motion pictures, while some theater owners had to really choose among thousands of available choices in choosing those films that would be presented in our hometown theaters. Basically, to elaborate more on this, is that they wanted to bring it to their neighborhoods, but they wanted to really do this in a way like put a theater near the neighborhood and from in their hometowns, and the theater would get all those neighborhoods to attend these theaters and showing those cheap films of the silent films during the segregation times when audience members lived away from expensive venues as in hotels or motels, and they wanted to live in those low cheap neighborhoods to watch cheap films during those tough times. In slide 4, there was the most influenced by this form of pop culture and why and how it became a phenomenon. Well, as a matter of fact, I could say that the one concept is global influences, because why it influenced this pop culture, because it was formed as a pop culture during the 1900s because it gave it a touch of quality in their films that bring audiences to many theaters across the world of cinema as of today. And it's what it took its main point on silent films, bringing the tones of dark and comedic themes in this generation, which is called globalization. And that is my first concept. But diving into this more, I've learned that deaf communities around the world have been influenced by this popular phenomenon excuse me, towards silent films, since deaf people were really excited to see the movements in action and letters when watching these films without any sound effects or music. It gave them a thrilling excitement to thrive on the energy of watching how actors portray comedy within a silent film. In slide 5, we see how the decade of pop culture has been housing a few things defining this decade of social political events towards the silent films of the 1900s. And as I can say in my very brief observation, that without a doubt, it gave them preparations for many future foundations of many and several filmmaking careers. But somehow it was also a downfall towards World War I and World War II. To explain and elaborate, there have been many anti-German sentiments that were proven commercial success, but it did place Warner Brothers at the very top table of American film producers, since it was using war propaganda to spread and influence across nation by nation to sometimes help the U.S. at its peak low in gaining an advantage to their economic system of the Great Depression or the economy crash. In making those films with energizing and powerful documentaries and interviews towards soldiers fighting in the First World War in real life time. Though, I want to add, though, that there is a fact out there that some nations didn't do so well, like China would really restrict its filmmakers from making these films based on the U.S., and Japan was pushing for a law to be passed on to anyone making a film of real propaganda of the U.S. would instantly face criminal charges or death. This is why during the Cold War of post-war World War II would bring in the new Hollywood age of cinema to appear on every movie screen and taking over political events to shape their new upcoming future filmmaking careers to being compared to real world life events. And to elaborate more on my slide, basically what filmmakers didn't like about US is that about their filmmakers in China being restricted from the US is because it was taking away their rights, their beliefs in China's supremacy. So, as an example, I would say it was basically offending their cultural religions or culture in general. In slide 6, we go and talk about silent films and how it all began. They are recorded sound or dialogue that contains visual cues, as in many symbols or shapes that use music to perform story tales in their silent films. Many actors, though, would perform exaggerating expressions or gestures to narrating wonderful stories that were title cards. That were also title cards. But these title cards that were portrayed in the films were to give the actors indications of the plot and key dialogue lines that were sometimes not always used to deem necessary only if an actor or actress would forget their lines. Though there were also some special effects in science films, but it was to overreact the themes in conveying the substitutes for more naturalistic possibilities to sounds in props which contain music, instruments, and character movements. Silent films were really a phenomenon during their cultural in the 18s and early 90s because it was a more new wave of technology use, and it brought upon a bridge of language barriers to forms of subtitles and to reflect the issues of societies of their time that were based off real-time events during World War I, Cold War, which is a post-war, and, last but not least, World War II. An example for this is that it delivered cheap entertainment for millions of immigrants coming to America in the early 20th century. Though in conclusion, it was pretty good for the film industry because during those times, it made many cheap film theaters across the United States in gaining their earnings to many screenings of silent films. In my 7th or 8th slide, I can say that my other two concepts that I've been using for my presentation are a man with a rubber head in the film, since it gives away a more inventing concept on air pollution towards subjects that are living and can float away, which was air inside a human head. So basically, it would make the head float away when being inflated with air or oxygen. And this was more of a first-time experience for the inventor in the silent film. And this is relative to my second concept, which is innovation of sociology imagination. And my last and but least concept is a symbolic interactionism described in The Mermaid of 1904. This film, though, is a man in his tuxedo suit performing his own ways of magic art style in an artistic approach. And what he does is transform himself into old man magician. Then he made a mermaid appear on stage with a whole giant growing fish tank, and showing how he symbolizes his ways of magic, but with art in the background. And after that, he was rescuing the mermaid and made her his queen. And then the magician became the king on the throne near the mermaid as his own kingdom. And there were also several to add people, at least 4 or 3 females characters, like servants, and making it look like it was a throne or a kingdom. And the screen does cut to black, which all of this means the magician was trying to give the audience members a way in describing his own artistic style of magic that symbolizes basically a reality, in talking about the rich communities during the ancient cultures that took many decades ago. And it gave them a bit of a more inventing take on how or what made these films really good. Also, to point out, the library of sources I've been using, and I'm very sorry for the background noise, Professor, a book that talks about the media and movies, a catalog of American journalism films on 1900s to the 1996 by Langman Learning, author 2009. In this book, there will be many Americans who talk about journalism in films, but also socialize how many people compare the society sociology in the journalism of these films, and how they put into the effort of making these films, comparing them to real life social communities, and what really made those social communities react to what is society today, or what it was from now and then on, and so forward and on beyond. Though the second book is more on the depths of sociology, basically how they put into all the types of sociology imagination concepts in films, but also it gives a way of a description on their cultures and how they were influencing many communities and their image of beliefs towards religion and education. The third book talks about basically the writings on, like, say, scripts of their popular films on genre theory. This is a way to say that it gave them a more perspective on the mystery and the studies of what really led genre towards sociology, and what notions of genre it could give away to sociology, and what comparison it has, towards sociological imagination. And this is the end for my presentation, Dr. Erica Smith. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Any feedback is A-okay, and I apologize for the outside distractions of sounds and effects. Thank you very much, and thank you for watching my PowerPoint presentation. Goodbye.